Tonight on CFTK-TV, Pierre Poilievre introduces a three-strike policy, the reality of tariffs and how they affect small businesses, and where BC citizens stand in the federal election polls.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Hello, I'm Damian Smith, and thank you for joining us here on CFTK-TV. We begin tonight's cast with another tariff update where U.S. President Donald Trump has now authorized a 90-day pause on some tariffs while vowing to raise levies against China to 125%, which are expected to hit immediately. However, the White House did confirm that Canada is currently exempt from the 10% tariffs that it's imposing on dozens of other countries. Despite that, several other U.S. tariffs remain in place, including a 25% rate on foreign-made automobiles, of which Canadian vehicles are still exempt until a U.S. administration, quote, establishes a process to tax exclusively the non-American vehicle components of the Canada, U.S., and Mexico agreement. Levies on steel and aluminum, which originally took effect on March 12th, are also in place, and 25% tariffs on all Canadian imports and 10% on Canadian energy, which are related to border security, also happen to apply. Now we move over to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who has introduced a new three-strike rule that would be implemented if he were to be elected as Prime Minister.
We have individual offenders who by themselves raise the crime rate for an entire city. There's one offender in Penticton that police say when he's out of jail, the crime rate for all of Penticton goes up because he by himself does that much crime. The good news is that we don't have a lot of criminals in Canada. The bad news is they're very productive. Enough. It's time to lock up the very small group of rampant career criminals who are causing all the chaos. Anyone convicted of three serious offenses will be ineligible thereafter for bail, probation, parole, or house arrest. And they will serve a minimum of 10 years behind bars, a maximum of life imprisonment, and they will have to earn their release even still. We will designate such offenders as dangerous offenders, meaning they cannot be released until they have proven that they are no longer a danger to society.
And as yesterday's headliners, stocks dropped tremendously, then rose again fairly quickly, but the U.S.-China trade war is looking to continue. However, Trump did mention today that he is open to making a deal with China. With more, here's John Venevali-Rao over in Canada's financial capital.
At the opening bell, stocks rose sharply after a savage three-day sell-off that saw some investors this morning bet the worst might be over.
Front and center this hour, the rebound in stocks. S&P looking for its first positive day in 4.
And with America's Treasury Secretary saying nearly 70 countries have approached the U.S. to talk tariffs and make deals, the markets seem to respond positively. The Dow initially up more than 1,400 points.
The news that they're talking with South Korea, the news that they're talking with Japan, the news that they're talking with Taiwan is helping to calm the jittery nerves.
But it didn't last.
Put today's bounce into the entry of classic bear market bounce.
Markets sliding and the S&P 500 closing below 5,000 for the first time in nearly a year, as the White House said it would forge ahead with tariffs against China, totaling 104% and starting just after midnight, after China ignored Donald Trump's demand it remove retaliatory tariffs.
It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder.
China calling it bullying and blackmail and says it will fight to the end, a standoff that sent stocks spiraling downward.
I think the big bogey is China, and until the U.S. and China can get on the same page, then we're going to continue to see volatility in the market.
Meanwhile, with tougher tariff penalties set to be imposed on dozens of countries, tensions are mounting between two of Trump's top advisors after Peter Navarro said this about Elon Musk.
Elon's a car manufacturer, but he's not a car manufacturer. He's a car assembler. He wants the cheap foreign parts, and we understand that, but we want him home.
On X, Musk calling Navarro a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks.
These are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue.
A growing number of influential voices on Wall Street have been warning about a potential recession if the trade war escalates.
The economy is weakening as we speak. Most CEOs I talk to would say we are probably in a recession right now.
As for Toronto's main stock index, it was down about 1.5% and has now reached an 8-month low.
And moving on to election news, the Conservative Party is looking to move towards a preference of healthcare sites instead of consumption sites for drug use, which has been a large issue at stake here in British Columbia. Isabella Zavarisi has the story down in Vancouver.
Overdose prevention sites like this one in downtown Vancouver allow people to use drugs in a supervised environment. But if federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre comes into power, he promises they'll cease to exist.
My message is we're not going to allow these drug dens near our kids or our vulnerable populations.
Poilievre is vowing to clamp down on harm reduction services, opting to focus on treatment instead. It's a plan the BC Conservatives support.
Yeah, we campaigned actually, with a promise to do the very same thing, which is to get rid of some of the sites and to move towards a healthcare-centered model.
So there's big changes that are needed, and I'm glad to see the federal government is talking about these things because they are huge issues in British Columbia.
Poilievre says he will cut funding at federally regulated supervised consumption sites, which BC's health minister says could prompt legal action.
There are federal sites like Insight, and we know that there have been court challenges around that. I expect that if someone like Pierre Poilievre formed government and tried to do that, we'd see the same kind of challenge again.
The NDP says it will continue to fight for the sites.
We have to continue to do everything that we can to fight this toxic drug crisis. And overdose prevention sites right now continue to be a part of that.
The BC Centre on Substance Use thinks Poilievre's policies are dangerous.
If Mr. Poilievre succeeds in being elected and following through on this promise, these actions, closing these sites, would result in the preventable deaths of Canadians.
With weeks to go until the election, Canadians will have to decide whether they agree or disagree with his approach on how to tackle this crisis that's already claimed almost 50,000 lives nationally. Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News, Vancouver.
Coming up next, how tariffs have shut down small businesses in the grocery sector. Welcome back to CFTK-TV. Well, before the trade war officially started, we understood that shutdowns of smaller businesses could eventually arrive here in Canada and be a result from tariffs from the United States. Here's Craig Krause, who reports on the real-life scenario for people who own these small businesses.
There's bigger ones. Take the bigger one.
An angel to many in Chilliwack.
Brigida is just the most beautiful soul.
Brigida Crosby and her Title Meat Shop has been providing cheap meals for the community and helping those struggling to get by.
I love you. I love you.
But after 4 years, the storefront is closing.
We had a supplier ask for another 25%, and we just can't afford it.
Already selling meat around 30% less than others while trying to pay employees and keeping the lights on, losing $500,000 as she tried to keep the business alive.
The world is changing, and we see people that are here and they get a free bag of potatoes and they're crying, and that's not the way it's supposed to be, and that's a crisis. People are hungry for food.
Crosby isn't the only independent grocer to call it quits. Columbus Farm Market in North Vancouver can also no longer make ends meet after decades in business.
Everything goes up in price. Nothing comes down. Some months I'm reaching in my pocket and pulling out money just to keep the business afloat.
And the recent closures due to rising operating costs and rent doesn't stop in Chilliwack in North Vancouver. Fresh Ideas start here in Burnaby, also announcing it's closing its brick and mortar location after 17 years.
I would love to be doing this forever, but to be doing this forever, we have to change.
Moving the entire business online, preparing products in this Richmond plant, a pivot, But the question has to be asked.
So what is the future of independent grocers in Canada?
It's not going to be easy, but there is hope on the horizon.
It might be a little too late, but data from the Food Analytic Lab shows trust in independent grocers is rising.
The one player that actually has gained the most in terms of trust are independent grocers.
A glimmer of hope.
Chicken noodle?
But in the meantime, as Tidal Foods prepares to lock its doors next week, Crosby will continue to provide meals for those most in need.
Anything helps.
Anything at all, $10, $5, any donation. It helps tremendously.
Craig Crow, CTV News, Chilliwack.
And now we take a look at the local weather forecast for tonight and for the week ahead, where it should be a little bit cooler than last week. Tonight on the north coast, it should have some showers tonight with winds from the southeast at 20 kilometers per hour, increasing to 60 over the coastal sections this evening, as well as after midnight, and the low should be +5 for overnight. This week, we'll see some rain tomorrow with a good chance of showers Friday, some relative sun on Saturday, then back to rain on Sunday. A bit cooler temperatures this week than the past few weeks as well. The high will be 9 degrees over on Monday as of right now, and the low will be 3 degrees on Friday. Tonight in Terrace and Kitimat, it should see cloudy conditions with a 40% chance of showers this evening as well as after midnight. Winds should be coming from the south at 20 kilometers per hour, increasing to 40 at times, changing to 20 from the north near midnight time, and the low should be 4 degrees. This week we'll see some rain tomorrow, a drop to 5 degrees on Friday, some sun on Saturday, and then a slight chance of snow on Sunday during the day. The high will be Monday at 11 degrees and the low will be -2 on Saturday evening. In the Bulkley Valley, tonight should be partially cloudy with a 30% chance of showers earlier in the evening. The low should be -4 overnight. And for this week, there's a gradual increase of temperature throughout the week with some sunnier days heading into the weekend. The high looks like it will also be on Monday at 12 degrees and the low will be -5 on Saturday night. And now we take a look at your roadside report from around the Northwest. For additional updates, check out drybc.ca. On Highway 16, there is bridge maintenance on Haida Gwaii, utility work west of Rainbow Lake and west of Terrace, road sweeping east of Burns Lake, and bridge maintenance east of Smithers. Highway 37 has frost heaves throughout. Highway 37A has road sweeping with a road closure up until 3 a.m. and falling rocks throughout, and Telegraph Creek Road has muddy sections. And these are what the cameras were looking like from around the Northwest. Still to come, how different parties look to tackle the housing crisis. Hello again. Well, with Mark Carney axing the carbon tax as his first order of business back when he was elected as Prime Minister, we're now seeing how MLAs are dealing with life without the carbon tax here in BC. Here is Robert Buffum of CTV News down on the island.
Prices at gas stations across BC, including Victoria, are down a week after the province axed the carbon tax.
I'm happy when I have to pay less for gas. I will never complain about paying less.
But the opposition has plenty of complaints about the size of the government's deficit or what programs it has to cut after losing the $3 billion in revenue it planned for in last month's budget before the carbon tax was eliminated. A net loss of nearly $2 billion despite canceling the related tax credit.
The only conclusion we have is this is a fudge budget. It's not a real budget, and who knows where these numbers will go.
The BC Conservatives point to the $6 billion surplus inherited by Premier Eby and an $11 billion deficit they say has grown even further with the elimination of the carbon tax revenue. A deficit pegged last week at $14.3 billion by credit rating agency Moody's.
You're talking about a deficit this large, it's impossible to be able to recover from. And that means that it puts all programs at risk. That's why we're asking the questions. Where are they planning to make cuts? What are they planning to do to actually deal with this size of deficit?
Various ministries are currently debating how their budget's spent. The opposition say they need to know whether certain ministries face program cuts to engage in a proper debate.
Is the minister cutting these vital programs, or are billions being added in debt to their budget?
I don't know if we were debating real numbers or a fudged budget. So which is it?
The finance minister won't say how big the deficit is now projected or where exactly cuts are coming.
Of course there's going to be an impact from the carbon tax. You've already seen that. We've gotten rid of the climate action tax credit, which was designed in order to help people with the cost of the carbon tax. So there's more work ahead.
Bailey says an update on the deficit will be provided as per usual practice in September.
And both the Liberals and New Democrats were focused on housing yesterday in BC, with the cost of living and cost of housing a big issue in this campaign and in many other places in Canada. CTV's Abigail Beeman is following the Liberal campaign and reports from Delta.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction to almost 500,000 new homes every single year. Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable.
The Liberals are promising to double residential construction to nearly 500,000 homes a year over the next decade and provide $25 billion in financing for prefabricated home builders like this plant in BC so they can scale up production. This company says only about 20% of the wood you see here for prefabricated homes is Canadian. Due to cost and quality, most is from Europe. But the president says now is the moment to make it 100% Canadian.
It could be done relatively fast. I think we are pretty ready to do it. We already have quite a lot of suppliers that are competitive.
Also in BC, New Democrats were focused on housing, promising a permanent ban on foreign home buyers in an effort to stop skyrocketing home prices and strengthen rules against house flipping.
Homes in Canada should be for you and your family, not for rich investors to get richer.
Meanwhile, Conservatives have also made housing a priority in the campaign. The biggest promise is to cut GST on new homes under $1.3 million. And no coincidence, the Liberals focused on the connection between housing and lumber here in BC, with 50,000 forestry workers in the province.
And now we take a look at the stock market, where every single category is up today. The Canadian dollar is up 0.2 of a penny. The price of gold is up $89.20. Oil is up $2.72. Natural gas is up 35 cents. And aluminum is up $16. In Toronto, the TSX is up 1,220 points. The Venture Index is up 36.9. In New York, the Dow Jones is up 2,962, and NASDAQ is up 1,857. Well, Vancouver International Airport is the best airport in North America and one of the top 15 in the world, according to annual rankings released today. It's the second year in a row that YVR has claimed the top spot on the continent at the Skytrax World Airport Awards. Vancouver was also the top North American airport in the 2024 edition of the awards, while it was second in the region back in 2023. Over the last 16 years, YVR has claimed the top spot regionally 14 times. YVR is also ranked 13th globally, and all 12 spots above it are filled by facilities located in Europe or Asia. Still ahead, polls show which parties BC citizens will be voting for. Welcome back to our final segment. While the Conservatives and the Liberals made their appearances in BC this week, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh also made his way to the province, with many reports of his seat potentially slipping, specifically in the Vancouver riding. Mike Couture from CTV reports.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Now. Attempting to hold on to the union vote, Jagmeet Singh visited a picket line where Life Labs workers have been holding rotating strikes for more than a month. It's a key cohort as the NDP leader pushes back on reports that he could lose his own seat.
I'm confident that I'll be able to serve the people of Burnaby Central.
The latest from Nanos Research has the NDP polling a distant third with just 8% of support nationally. Numbers that won't be helped by a former New Democrat MP who is endorsing Liberals in BC. Murray Rankin confirming to CTV News he is supporting NDP candidates as well as Mark Carney's candidates, Jonathan Wilkinson and Talib Noor Mohammed.
How much does that bother you?
Well, I think it's wrong to suggest that in this time that we need less New Democrats. We need more New Democrats.
Liberals say the endorsement is an indication of where voters are right now.
Canadians are at the middle of the political spectrum. You know, strong New Democrats in this province, strong progressive conservatives who see those values.
David Fung voted NDP provincially, but is turned off by Singh.
Unfortunately, his messaging comes across as he's just trying to do everything, do too much. And he tries to come across really like a big, tough guy.
NDP stalwart Jenny Kwan is standing by Singh, adding what people see in the polls isn't what she's seeing on the ground.
The power of the NDP has always rested in the grassroots and the people. And so our army of volunteers getting out there, door knocking, canvassing, phoning, doing all of those jobs is making a difference. And I feel it.
Despite having half of their current caucus from this province, the NDP isn't planning any big rallies with supporters while Singh is here. One campaign official tells us those rallies pull volunteers off the doorsteps, and right now they want to focus on the ground game.
And provincially, British Columbia was pretty split between the NDP and Conservatives in the provincial election this past fall, but that was because of BC United leader Kevin Falcon dropping out a couple of months before the election day. But the federal Liberal Party finds themselves at the top of the polls. St. Jean Alexander has our final story of the day.
What Trump will do next in Canada's relationship with the U.S. remains the #1 issue for voters.
As you know, the tariffs are on and the money is pouring in.
That's followed by the economy, jobs, housing, and healthcare, all according to the latest nationwide poll by Vancouver-based Research Co. It finds the Liberals have the most support among decided voters, 44% nationally and in British Columbia.
These numbers we haven't seen since 1968 under Pierre Trudeau. So it's impressive in the sense that Mark Carney has been on the job for just 4 weeks and is amassing the kind of lead in British Columbia that we haven't seen for Paul Martin, for Jean Chrétien, or even for Justin Trudeau.
And the U.S. tariffs will only increase the cost of materials for American builders, and ultimately American homebuyers will pay the price.
Carney also has a commanding lead when it comes to who would make the best prime minister. But it is still early in the campaign, and Pierre Poilievre is pulling in large crowds. His party, while not in the lead, is polling high, and he's also seen as the best candidate to deal with crime.
A new Conservative government that will axe taxes, build homes, unleash our resources.
The problem for Poilievre is that crime is not as high as an issue as it used to be in other elections. Everything is being dominated by Canada-US relations.
We are speaking to all Canadians and saying, please, broaden your horizons.
Those high numbers for the frontrunners are coming at the expense of the Greens and the NDP.
This is an important election, and campaigns matter. So I want you to know, in this election, the choice is really important.
That support seems to be going to the Liberals, which Canseco says usually doesn't happen until the end of the campaign.
So are they peaking too early, or is this just the prelude of where we're going to go in the next couple of weeks?
Research Co. also finds Canadians who normally don't pay much attention to elections are tuning in, so we could see a very large turnout. St. Jean Alexander, CTV News, Vancouver.
That'll be all for the cast tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great evening.